An experiment more than 15 years ago has turned into a visitor's favorite in the Smokies.
We are talking about the elk fall rut, and while you can't enjoy it on the Tennessee side of the park, it is worth the time to see this in person. So we are taking you to Oconaluftee in our first 6 Explores. In just a handful of valleys tucked away in the shadows of the Great Smoky Mountains, elk almost appear to be on display this time of the year. While wildlife is abundant here in our mountains, seeing elk like this generally only happens a few weeks out of the year during the fall rut or the breeding season. That means from late September to early November, these once nearly extinct creatures come out into the open, where you can watch the bulls corralling the females and the calves.
The bulls are bugling, they're fighting with each other, all of the females are grouped up in tight groups. The leaves start to change colors, the air's a little cooler, so all in all, just a really nice time to be out with the elk.
There are only about 100 elk in the park, and right now they call North Carolina home. Park biologists know this because they closely monitor these animals. The elk were wiped out in our area nearly 200 years ago and only reintroduced in 2 places, Oconaluftee and the Cataloochee Valley in North Carolina.
Beginning in 2001, we brought elk in from Land Between the Lakes, Kentucky and Elk Island National Park in Alberta as an experiment to see if elk could survive here. Across about 8 years, we figured out, yes, they can survive, and they're doing quite well.
And while all of this attracts quite a crowd, there are some dangers here as well. When you're taking in the sights of the elk here in Oconaluftee, don't forget that you need to keep your distance. There are signs reminding you to stay at least 50 yards away, and there are also volunteers on hand at all times here in the evening, making sure that traffic keeps moving and that visitors keep their distance. The problem is, sometimes that isn't enough.
We have had a couple of close calls, including this year. We had a man that ended up climbing a tree because he felt threatened by the elk. Basically waited in that tree until park staff member came down and chased the elk off.
Outside of rangers, there are 4 park volunteers staffed near the Oconaluftee Visitor Center each and every night of the rut.
Keep moving, do not stop.
Part of their job is to prevent traffic jams near the fields with the elk. The other part is to educate and try to protect visitors who don't seem to understand these are still wild animals.
People will start walking out in the middle of the field thinking that they're friendly. The elk are not friendly, they're not tame. And one time somebody asked me, but they've got collars on them. And I said, well, we don't take them for walks or anything.
In fact, the elk reminded us several times during our interviews that you need to stay alert because they can be pretty unpredictable.
First, my mom come there, and
Heads up,
then
folks.
my
Heads up.
dad
That's okay.
Sorry, they're running.
They can also be quite vocal, which ironically they demonstrated just as park rangers were trying to explain the elk's erratic behavior this time of the year.
The bulls, their testosterone level is increased by about 1,000 times what they are normally, and so they're a lot like an angry teenager. They just know nothing but no.
Still, if you follow the safety guidelines, this is an incredible chance for you to experience something many only read about in school books.
I made it out, and we made them, and we learned about the letter E.
And if you're lucky enough, you can also capture that perfect shot of one of these majestic creatures. We had such a great time in the park. By the way, everyone, the elk are most active early in the morning and late in the day. The rut is winding down right now, but with the warmer temperatures this past weekend, I'm hearing there's still a chance to see them yourself. In fact, someone posted something about seeing some gorgeous shots just last night. Now, whether you do this year or maybe next year, there are 3 safety tips that rangers want to make sure you keep in mind. First, always keep a 50-yard distance from any elk. You should also stay next to your vehicle so you can jump into it. If an elk does charge you, it does happen. And keep your dogs on a leash. Dogs can be triggers for elk and kind of upset them more than they already might be.
That makes sense, and to hear it described, oh, people say, well, they're wearing collars.
Yeah.
So that's how they're tracked?
They're GPS tracking and radio tracking, so they know that 2 of the elk actually came up close to Klingman's Dome but came back down.
Okay.
And at the time of our story, there were none inside the Tennessee side of the park. So yeah, they do track them to see how they're growing throughout the years, and they say they're healthy and doing well, so hopefully we'll continue to see them.
Beautiful creatures, great story.
It was wonderful to do.